Today, we start our journey taking a look at the first edition Pathfinder, Swashbuckler. That's right, you heard correctly, we are covering the Swashbuckler. Now, what is the Swashbuckler? Well, think Captain Thorpe from The Seahawk as depicted by Errol Flynn, or Zorro from, well, the relatively more recent Antonio Banderas movies, or any of the older TV shows and movies that he's been depicted in. Your Swashbuckler is your quick-witted, rapier, and sharp-tongued character. They have all the charm and wit and the dexterous, nimble flicks of wrists that just send their swords piercing deep into the enemy and leave them reeling bloody messes as they charm their way through whatever situations may come up afterwards. That's the Swashbuckler. Lightly armored, very capable, gets into the deep of fighting, and comes out, even if bloodied, looking absolutely dashing afterwards. But in order to build the Swashbuckler, we need to go down to the absolute basics, and that means picking out the races and figuring out what we want our stats to look like. Now, just something of a caveat here for any of you new to the channel. These guides are not meant to be set in stone. They are effective builds. They're maybe not min-maxed all to hell to where they're broken and overpowered, but they're still good builds. They still follow a little bit of min-maxing, what is mathematically best practice for them. But it's not meant to be the only thing that you ever do. The races that I list here, they're just what are mathematically, mechanically going to be the most beneficial, not necessarily the most interesting. So if you have an interesting idea, a fun idea, funny, whatever, if it's piquing your interest, then go with that instead. Still, use this to help you build something that's mechanically effective, but still don't be afraid to add in what is essentially your own. Now, with that caveat out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this. They're adaptable, they're pliable, they fit in anywhere they go. It is, of course, the humans. Humans are just that gold standard by which everything else can be measured. They fit in with whatever class you want to throw them into, and that's because their bonuses make them great. They get a +2 bonus to any stat, so for the Swashbuckler, we're throwing that into either dexterity or charisma. They get a bonus feat and an extra skill point at each level, which that bonus feat always comes in handy, and so do the extra skill points. But one thing you may consider with them is going with the alchemically enhanced trait. This swaps out the floating +2 bonus that you get for your stats and the bonus feat, but in exchange, you get a +3 bonus to your strength, dexterity, and constitution, and you take a -2 penalty on fortitude saves versus poison. That's a negligible penalty, more often than not, unless your DM is coming up with their own custom poisons to use in game that are coming up constantly and regularly. You're gonna be fine. Poisons, everybody forgets about them at some point. They don't really come up too terribly often, and when they are present, they're just usually not that great or all that debilitating. The really, really dangerous and effective poisons you're typically going to be finding on higher level challenge rated monsters, like pit fiends, for example. But beyond that, you're probably not going to be worried too much. So that's a worthwhile penalty to take. I mean, especially if you're in a game where you're buying your stats with points rather than rolling them out with the dice. Getting a +3 bonus to all 3 of your physical stats frees up a lot of points for you to play around with. So that way you can crank your dexterity a bit better. You can have more points for your wisdom or your intelligence or your charisma. So really, that's actually very effective. The only real drawback that may be preventing you from taking it is your DM may say, no, can't do it. Or at least in my case, if one of my players came to me with this one, alchemically enhanced. Okay, that's interesting, but I want a story with it. How and why were you alchemically enhanced? How has that affected your character? How is that intertwined with their story? I want a story behind a lot of the things my players do, especially if it's something that's a major departure from the norm. One, because that just makes for a better character. Two, is because, if somebody is repeatedly making an alchemically enhanced human, that gets old after a while, and I want them to either justify it through a good story or pick something different, so bear that in mind. But from there, we also have the Muse-touched Asmar, also called the Azada-blooded Asmar. The most beautiful, jovial, quick-witted, and charming and joking of the Asmar races, which is saying something. They get a +2 dexterity bonus to their dexterity and their charisma. They also get a +2 bonus on their diplomacy and their perform skills. They also get glitter dust as a spell-like ability, which is fantastic. This helps to outline invisible opponents, reveals them so you can deal with that, as well as other effects. Glitter dust is awesome, great ability to have. And really, the Muse-touched Asmar just blends in overall personality-wise, lore-wise, and ability-wise very, very well with the Swashbuckler. The Spite-spawned Tiefling is also a pretty close second to their Asmar cousins. They get a +2 bonus to their dexterity and charisma, but they do take a -2 hit to their intelligence score. They also will get a +2 bonus on their diplomacy, but then their linguistic skill as well. Misdirection they get as a spell-like ability, but its usefulness really can vary wildly. If you're in a campaign where a DM is regularly using different scrying spells or other divinations to locate you, then this is going to be great. Fantastic thing to have handy in your back pocket there. But those don't always come up, and there's some campaigns where they can kind of end up being forgotten about or fairly irrelevant, so that ability won't really do much for you. Now, yeah, it can vary wildly, so it's really not great here. Out of all three of these races, this one probably ranks third. Human, pretty closely tied for first, but falls just into second, but that's just because the Muse-touched Asmar fits so nicely all the way around. From there, though, we need to figure out our stats. Now, this array here assumes that you're getting a 25-point buy, which is fairly high. If you're rolling 4d6 for stats, that is rolling 4 6-sided dice, taking the 3 highest and rolling for each stat, then you can follow this array in the general terms of importance. Dexterity and charisma are going to be the two big ones that you focus on, and they're both important enough that you can have them tied and vary a little bit between them. Dexterity will help you with your armor class, your initiative, your reflexes, your skills, and especially if you're using light, finessable weapons, it's going to affect your attack score as well. Charisma is going to be affecting your face skills as well as your panache, the number of points that you have for your swashbuckler deeds, which is a very important class ability. So whichever one you're going with, they're going to be tied, but one will probably come out ahead of the other. From there, you go down to your constitution because, well, you're a melee fighter. You're going to be in the thick of things. You need to be able to survive taking a hit. So your constitution is next in importance, and you want to put at least a 14 in here. From there, strength we have here at a 13 for a particular aspect of this build, and that's unlocking feats like power attack, which are going to be massively useful for your ability to dish out damage. Then we have wisdom and your intelligence. Your intelligence you can get away with lowering a little bit. You're naturally getting more skill points than a fighter anyways, and depending on how you work things out with favored class bonuses, you can occasionally slip in the extra skill point if you need to. And if you're human, you're getting an extra skill point anyways. So you can play with that one a little bit. But I'd recommend at least not tanking your wisdom score. You need that to help with your will saves. But certainly this is not the only build possible. This is not the only stat array possible. So, what do you think? Have I missed my mark at all? Or do you feel like this pretty well covers things? Certainly, there are other races to recommend. Half-elves certainly fit very nicely, and half-orcs can make surprisingly good swashbucklers as well. Go on down to the comments below and let me know what you thought. Hit that like button or the dislike button. Let's engage in discussion here. Also, if you haven't done so yet, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. Certainly, we'd be happy to have you. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.